People stopped and stared, not because she was loud, but because she was so small, so serious, and so heartbreakingly focused on what lay in her tiny hands. A little black girl stood outside a corner store, counting her pennies on the curb while cars sped past, their drivers too busy to notice her trembling lips whispering, 23, 24, 25. And from the window of a black Bentley parked across the street, a billionaire laughed. "Look at that," Charles Donovan said with a dry chuckle, swirling the coffee in his gold-trimmed cup. "Counting pennies like it's going to change the world." His driver, Walter, glanced at him in the mirror. "Maybe it'll change hers, sir." Charles smirked, leaning back in his leather seat. "With 25 cents? The only thing that'll change is her disappointment." But even as he said it, something in the scene outside tugged at his attention, the way the girl's fingers shook when a coin slipped from her hand and rolled toward the drain. She gasped, chased it, and smiled with relief when she caught it just in time. He didn't know why that moved him. Maybe because it looked like desperation wrapped in innocence. Maybe because it reminded him of something he'd forgotten. The girl closed her eyes for a moment and whispered, "Please let it be enough." Charles raised an eyebrow. "Enough for what?" he murmured. "Should I drive, sir?" Walter asked quietly. "Wait," Charles said, still watching. "Let's see what she's up to." She picked up her coins, held them tightly against her chest, and walked toward the small store with a flickering sign, Miller's Market. The bell above the door gave a faint jingle as she pushed it open. Charles frowned. "She can't be more than 8. Walter nodded. "Looks about right. And she's shopping alone." "Looks that way, sir." Charles' laughter was more nervous now. What parent lets their kid wander around with loose change in this neighborhood? Walter didn't answer. He'd been with Charles long enough to recognize when a man was saying cruel things, just to avoid feeling something. Through the glass, Charles watched her stretch up on tiptoe to see the counter. He couldn't hear her words, but her small hands opened, showing her collection of coins. The cashier leaned forward, shaking her head gently. The little girl's face fell. Charles felt an odd twist in his chest. He lowered his sunglasses, peering closer. "What did she say?" he muttered. Walter shrugged. "Looks like she doesn't have enough." The girl started gathering her coins again, slow and embarrassed. Charles sighed. "She's learning early. Life doesn't hand you what you want just because you ask." Walter gave him a side glance. Maybe she's not asking for herself. That stopped Charles for half a second. Then he scoffed. "Everyone asks for themselves, Walter. That's how the world works." Inside the store, the girl hesitated, then turned back to the counter. Charles couldn't hear, but he could see her lips move. The cashier shook her head again, but softer this time, like she wanted to say yes, but couldn't. The girl lowered her gaze, nodded politely, and turned to leave. Charles stared. Something about the quiet way she accepted defeat made him sit up straighter. "Pull over," he said suddenly. Walter blinked. "Sir?" I said pull over. Right there." The Bentley glided to a stop across the street. Charles stepped out, his shoes shining like mirrors on cracked pavement. Heads turned as he crossed the road. His presence didn't fit this place. When he entered the store, the bell chimed again. The cashier looked up, startled. The girl stood frozen in front of the bread shelf, staring at a single small loaf. Charles's voice broke the silence. "How much for the bread?" The cashier blinked. $2, sir." The girl looked at him nervously. "It's okay, I don't need help." He tilted his head. "You sure? Looked like you were short a few cents." Her chin lifted proudly. "I was, but I'll come back when I get more." Charles frowned. "How long will that take?" She hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe a few days." "What's it for?" The girl's eyes softened. "For my mama. She's sick. I just wanted to bring her something to eat." The words hit him harder than he expected. He cleared his throat. 54 cents short, right?" She nodded slowly. He pulled out a crisp $100 bill, placed it on the counter and said, That should cover it. Her eyes widened. That's too much, mister. He smiled faintly. Then consider it an investment in your mother's recovery. The cashier hesitated. Are you sure, sir? Charles waved a hand. Keep the change. He turned to leave, but the little girl's voice stopped him. Wait. He turned, expecting her to thank him, but her next words silenced him. I can't take that much, she said softly. It's not right. Mama says we don't take more than we earn. Charles froze. Your mama taught you that? She nodded proudly. Even if we don't have much, we got our pride. For the first time in years, his smile faltered, not because he didn't understand her words, but because they reminded him of someone he once knew. His mother, long gone, had said something like that when he was a boy. He swallowed hard, trying to hide the lump in his throat. Your mama, she sounds wise. The girl smiled faintly. She is. She just needs to get better. Then she can go back to work. Charles stared at her for a moment. The courage, the innocence, the love. Then he looked at the bread in her hand. It was more than food. It was devotion. He nodded. You take that bread, sweetheart, and tell your mom she raised one strong kid. She beamed, clutching the loaf close to her chest. Thank you, mister. He walked out without another word, but the echo of her voice followed him all the way to his car. Walter looked up as Charles slid into the back seat. You all right, sir? Charles didn't answer at first. He stared through the window, watching the little girl disappear into the crowd, her braids bouncing as she ran home. Follow her, he said quietly. Walter blinked. Sir? Follow her. I want to see where she's going. The Bentley moved slowly down the narrow streets, trailing the small figure in the distance. She turned down a side alley lined with cracked walls and flickering streetlights. At one point she stopped to help a stray dog untangle its leash from a pole, then smiled and kept walking. Charles watched, his expression softening. Even when she has nothing, she still helps. Walter glanced at him. Guess her mama taught her more than pride, sir. She stopped at a small building, peeling paint, broken steps, windows covered with old newspapers to keep the cold out. She went inside, clutching her bread like treasure. Charles sat there, unmoving. She lives there? Walter nodded quietly. For a long time Charles said nothing. Then, without looking away from the door, he murmured, Wait here. He stepped out, walked up the cracked path, and knocked. After a moment, the door creaked open. The girl's face appeared, surprised. Mister, you followed me? He smiled awkwardly. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you got home safe. From inside came a weak voice. Sarah, who's that baby? It's the nice man from the store, Mama. Let him in, the mother said softly. Charles hesitated, then stepped inside. The apartment was small, 2 rooms, 1 broken fan, a tiny stove, and a single window that barely opened. Yet the space was tidy, filled with the faint scent of lavender soap and hope. On the bed lay a woman in her 30s, her skin pale, her eyes tired but kind. She smiled weakly. Sir, I don't know what you did for my daughter, but thank you. Charles nodded. She's brave. You must be proud. I am, the woman whispered. She keeps me going. Some days I think I wouldn't wake up if not for her. Sarah placed the bread on the table beside her. I told you I'd bring it, Mama. Her mother stroked her hair gently. And you did, baby. You always do. Charles looked around, peeling paint, empty shelves, 1 broken chair. And yet there was peace here, the kind money couldn't buy. He cleared his throat. Is there anything you need? Food? Medicine? The woman smiled faintly. No, sir. We get by. God's been good to us. That line, God's been good to us, hit him like thunder. His own mother had said those exact words when she was dying, refusing help. He looked away, fighting the sudden sting behind his eyes. Finally, he pulled a black card from his wallet. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, call this number." The woman tried to protest. "Sir, we can't—" "Please," he interrupted softly. "Just keep it." Sarah smiled up at him. "Thank you, mister." He nodded slowly. "Take care of your mama, okay?" "I will." As he turned to leave, her small voice followed him, bright and innocent. "Mister, do you think rich people ever get sad?" He froze, hand on the doorknob. "Yeah," he said after a long pause. "Sometimes the richest people are the saddest ones." And with that, he walked out into the evening air, the setting sun reflecting off his car like molten gold. As the Bentley pulled away, Walter glanced in the mirror. "Everything okay, sir?" Charles stared ahead, voice quiet but steady. "Not yet, but maybe it will be." And for the first time in years, he smiled, not because he was amused, but because he finally felt something real. Rain started falling, soft at first, then harder, washing over the city streets like tears from the sky. The billionaire, Mr. Harrison, stood in the shadow of his limousine, watching as the little girl, Amara, stepped out of the store, clutching a tiny brown paper bag against her chest. Her small hands trembled, but her face glowed with pride. He couldn't look away. Inside that bag was something that had made her count every penny like it was a diamond. Something worth more to her than anything money could buy. Harrison's driver, James, glanced at him through the mirror. "Sir, are we leaving?" Harrison didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the girl. "Wait," he said quietly. "I want to see what she's going to do." Amara ran down the cracked sidewalk, her shoes soaked, her little yellow dress clinging to her legs. The rain didn't slow her. She looked determined, purposeful. Harrison followed in his car at a distance, confused at himself. Why did he even care? He had never followed anyone in his life. People followed him. Finally, the girl turned into a narrow alley, stopping beside an old woman sitting on the cold concrete, wrapped in torn blankets. Her face was thin, her body frail, but her eyes lit up the moment she saw Amara. "Grandma!" the girl gasped, kneeling beside her. "Look, I got it." The billionaire's heart thudded in his chest as he watched the scene unfold through the rain-spattered window. Amara pulled something from the bag, a small box of medicine. The old woman coughed weakly, trying to smile. You got it, baby?" Amara nodded, tears mixing with the rain. "I counted and counted, Grandma. I had just enough." The billionaire felt a lump rise in his throat. He stepped out of the car without thinking, the rain soaking his expensive suit, his shoes sinking in the puddles. The driver called out, "Sir, you'll catch a cold." But he didn't care. He approached slowly, his umbrella forgotten behind him. The girl looked up, startled to see the man she'd seen laughing earlier. You followed me?" she asked softly, fear flickering in her voice. Harrison knelt down beside her, his voice low, uncertain. "I did. I wanted to see what you were buying." Amara blinked, hugging the medicine box tighter. "It's for my grandma. She's sick. The doctor said she needs this, but it costs too much. I was saving for weeks. I think I made it." The billionaire's throat tightened. The girl had counted every penny, not for herself, but to keep her grandmother alive. He looked at the old woman. Her hands shook as she whispered, "Thank you, sir, for not chasing her away at the store. She worked so hard for this." Harrison's voice cracked. I didn't know." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a thick leather wallet. But as he held it, something inside him hesitated. For once, money didn't feel like enough. He had everything, jets, cars, mansions, yet this child, drenched in rain and hope, had something he didn't. Love that asked for nothing back. He knelt lower, looking at the girl. "Amara, can I help you?" She shook her head stubbornly. "You don't need to. I already helped my grandma." The billionaire smiled faintly through his tears. Yes, you did." For a long moment he stood there in silence, the rain falling harder, washing away the walls around his heart. Then he quietly handed her a folded check. "Take this. It's for you both. For medicine, food, and maybe a better roof." Amara's eyes widened. "Sir, I can't take that. Grandma says we don't take money we didn't earn." He smiled again, softly this time. "Then consider it an investment in your kindness." The old woman reached for his hand, her voice trembling. "God bless you, son." As Harrison turned to leave, something inside him shifted. A weight he hadn't known he carried began to lift. He wasn't just leaving a gift behind. He was leaving a part of himself he no longer needed, the coldness that had blinded him for years. Behind him, the girl's small voice called out through the rain, "Thank you, mister. I'll pay you back someday." He looked back with misty eyes. "You already have, Amara." And with that he stepped into his car, his reflection in the window no longer looking like a man of power, but a man finally learning what it meant to have a heart. 5 years had passed since the rainy day that changed everything. The world hadn't slowed down for anyone, not even for a billionaire like Edward Harrison. But inside him, something had slowed. Something had softened. Gone were the endless days of board meetings and ruthless decisions. The luxury jet still existed, the mansions still gleamed, but none of it carried the same weight anymore. Every night he found himself staring at that memory, the little black girl counting pennies with trembling hands, buying medicine with pride instead of pity. It haunted him in the most beautiful way. One morning he stood at the large window of his office tower, the city humming below, and whispered, "Amara." Her name had stayed with him. He didn't even know her last name, but he remembered her courage, her smile, her voice trembling in the rain. He called his assistant. "Find me the children's medical charity I told you to support last year, double their funding, and start a new program." "What kind of program, sir?" He looked out at the sky, eyes glistening. "One that helps kids like her, who give even when they have nothing." Months later, that idea grew into the Amara Foundation, named after the little girl who had unknowingly changed a billionaire's heart. It helped hundreds of children afford medicine, education, and food. But deep down, Harrison hoped that one day, somehow she'd find out, that the world knew her kindness had started it all. Years rolled by. On a bright Saturday morning, Edward visited a new community center that the Amara Foundation had funded in a small neighborhood. Children's laughter filled the air, the kind of laughter money could never buy. He was walking down the hallway when he heard a familiar tone, calm, gentle, yet full of strength. A young woman stood in a classroom, teaching a group of kids how to read. Her hair was neatly tied, her smile radiant, and her eyes, those same deep, shining eyes he could never forget. It was Amara. For a moment, time froze. She turned, her gaze catching his through the open door. Her eyes widened, her breath caught. "Mr. Harrison." He smiled softly, voice trembling. You remember me." "How could I not?" she said, walking toward him with tears glistening. "You followed me that day, and you helped me when no one else would." He chuckled lightly. "You gave me a reason to." They sat together in the empty classroom, children's drawings covering the walls. Amara spoke quietly. "After my grandma got better, I promised myself I'd study hard, that I'd help other kids who struggle like I did. I finished school, then college, I started volunteering here." Harrison looked at her with admiration. "You didn't just survive, Amara. You became someone's hope, the same way you were for your grandma." She smiled shyly. "I guess I learned from you." He shook his head slowly. "No, I learned from you. That day in the rain, you showed me something no fortune ever could. You showed me love that expects nothing, hope that doesn't fade." Amara wiped a tear. "You changed my life, Mr. Harrison." He looked away for a moment, his voice soft. "You changed mine first." Before leaving, Harrison handed her an envelope. "What's this?" she asked. He smiled. "A scholarship fund, for kids like you once were. I want you to manage it. You'll know best who needs it most." Her eyes widened. "You trust me with that?" "With my whole heart," he said. They stood there for a moment, the billionaire and the girl he once laughed at, now connected by something greater than wealth or pity, by compassion. As he turned to leave, she called out, "Mr. Harrison!" He stopped. Amara smiled through her tears. "Thank you for seeing me that day. Not as poor, not as small, but as someone who mattered." He smiled back, eyes misty. "Thank you, Amara, for showing me what matters." He walked outside, sunlight breaking through the clouds. The same city, the same streets. But everything looked different now, brighter, softer, kinder. Inside his car, he whispered to himself, "True wealth isn't what you keep, it's what you give." And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. In a world obsessed with what we can take, maybe the real measure of success is what we can give back. Because sometimes the smallest act, a child counting pennies, a stranger noticing, can rewrite an entire life. So the next time you see someone struggling, remember this story. You never know, that small act of kindness might just change your heart too. Compassion costs nothing, but it can make someone feel priceless. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Black Saga. Drop a comment sharing what kindness means to you, and share this video with someone who needs a little hope today, because kindness is the only currency that never loses value.